Every kid wants to have cool parents, but what they really need are parents who can keep their cool under any circumstance. So how can you do just that? Marriage and family therapist Hal Runkel is here this morning with some advice in this morning's Work and Family segment on parents keeping their cool. Good morning.
Thanks for having me.
It's the hardest thing to do. I was just telling you a story about my 4-year-old. When they do something you don't like, how do you keep your cool?
Oh, yeah, most people always say, scream-free parenting, yeah, right, that's like sweat-free jogging or something. It's impossible. And the difficulty is, you know what, if I'm waiting till the heat of the moment to all of a sudden keep my cool, then I've lost. Because I'm not equipped to do that.
You have to prepare for it ahead of time.
Exactly. And this whole book, this movement, Scream-Free Parenting, is all about taking a shift before the heat of the moment. And it's learning to shift your focus, to take your focus off of your children and place it back on ourselves.
Okay, well, I had the perfect example from yesterday. We were just talking about my 4-year-old ties a little rope around the 1-year-old's arm. Before I notice, she's yanked it. The baby's screaming, and I'm trying to get her to understand that wasn't a good decision.
Right. And trying to get her to understand is not exactly the right move because she's 4 years old. But the way that you teach her to understand is you let her know that there's consequences for that choice. Usually, the consequences that our kids experience are their parents flipping out.
Yes.
What I talk about is...
But then they learn to flip out back.
Exactly, exactly. And it just encourages the battles that we're all way too familiar with. But what I talk about is let the consequences do the screaming. Rather than me screaming to try and get them to behave. Again, I have to take the focus off of them and place it back on myself.
So does everyone have to know ahead of time what the consequences will be?
Not necessarily, but yeah, I think that's helpful. I think that's helpful. But again, it becomes too easy to get caught up in, I need to have this system of consequences in place that guarantees that once they taste this consequence, they'll never do that behavior again. You know? And that's the wrong focus. That's still, again, focused on them. And instead of me being focused on getting them to behave, I'm focused on what do I need to do to behave? How do I want to behave regardless of how they're behaving?
So in the heat of that moment, you have that problem. Do you take a second, take a breath, and remind yourself that?
Do whatever it takes to create that pause. Becoming scream-free is really about creating a pause between stimulus, your kid's driving you crazy, and response. And in that pause, I can choose how I want to respond, rather than just automatically flipping out. Because whenever I flip out, I not only make things worse, but actually creating the very things I was hoping to avoid in the first place. It's just amazing how it works.
Okay, you also say we're not responsible for our kids, we are responsible to them.
That's very, very difficult. I think the greatest lie that's been foisted upon us as parents is that, you know what, all of a sudden, once I have kids, my life is put on hold. I have no life, especially mothers have to struggle with this. I have no life anymore, it's all about my kids because I'm responsible for them. But I think that is an absolute lie. I'm not responsible for my kids because I want them to become responsible for themselves and for the choices they're making. Exactly. The only way I can do that is I have to take seriously my responsibility to them for how I behave, for how I conduct myself. I cannot orbit my whole life around my children without giving them the impression that the world revolves around them. And then I have the nerve to call them self-centered. Yeah. But I created that. We all talk about how kids have too much power. Yeah, they do, because we gave it to them. By letting them know, you know what, I can't handle it if you misbehave.
I can't handle it. Back on them.
Put it totally back on them, absolutely.
All right, great advice. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. For more advice from Hal, you can check out a copy of his book. It is called Scream-Free Parenting.